Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, December 15th. This is the Kubernetes sig-aws bi-weekly meeting. The meeting is recorded and will be posted on YouTube, I promise. And we do have an agenda, so if it's pretty light with the December workload, but if anyone wants to add anything, please do so. Right now, the only thing we have on the agenda is something I put on there that the 1.9 release is very likely to land today, if not this weekend or this weekend. And there are a bunch of features for AWS. There are volume improvements, NVMe support, NLB support is, I think, the massive, big feature. Thank you, Micah. Did the EBS create and tag land? I don't remember if I did that. That doesn't mean I didn't. I don't remember seeing it, so I'm guessing I did not. I think I forgot because it took a while to, so if anyone wants to, if it took a while for the AWS SDK Go bump to land.
So I talked to somebody in the NLB team at AWS, and they reviewed the docs, and they actually posted the comments on it, and it looked good, and it got merged, and everything is looking okay for now.
That's great. So yes.
I'm hoping there was one additional comment on it that was some spelling mistakes that I had put in hopes that somebody can solve that.
Yeah, that was again one of the essays, because I sent that not just to the NLB folks, but to a bunch of essays that focus on containers. So it's like, these guys are really digging deep.
Yeah, I have a follow-up PR. I posted in SigDocs. Right now, I think there's, until 1.9 is out, there's a docs freeze on release 1.9, and so I can't edit. I don't want to make a PR to release 1.9. I'll have to make it to master once that gets merged. But I have a patch already to make, and I'll make a PR later today with fixes for that. And I actually added docs for out of the 21 AWS ELB annotations, there's only 6 that are documented. So I added docs for the rest of those. So I'll get that out later today.
Micah, one question though. Can you include a link to a build which people can try, or maybe this is how I can set up a kops cluster using a particular version of Kubernetes where I can test the NLB support?
Oh, in the blog post.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you want me to do that in there? You want me to do that in there?
Yeah, well, not in the blog post. In blog post, sure.
Okay.
Blog post could possibly wait for 1.9 release, but I would say in general for the AWS SIG itself, if you can post a link where some of us can give it a shot on how does it look like.
Sure. Okay.
It is possible, by the way, to run any CI build locally. They do get deleted every month or so, but if you have even a PR, we'll have a publicly available one, and you can look at the kops test to see the URLs that it needs. But there's basically a tree that mirrors the release tree, and you can use those artifacts. You can pass the base URL to kops, which is how the testing works, or if you're using something different, you can look at the URLs and figure out what it would be for your own solution. But it is the images are there. You can wget or curl and Docker load them. You can do all that sort of stuff.
That's news to me. I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, and I think that would be a nice blog post as well, that I want to set up a random Kubernetes version cluster on AWS, and kops allows me to do that. And how do I do that? Because the more we make it visible that, oh, I wanted to test this particular PR, and here is how I did it. So maybe you're giving me ideas on my new blog post, essentially.
That's cool. That'd be great. And it is a nice trick. It is a little annoying that they go away after a month, which of course you can understand given that they're a gigabyte plus and on every build. But yeah, it works great.
Where is kops test?
The easiest way is if you go to a PR and click through, you should be able to see the logs and see the build log, and then you get the full build log, and in there it will have if you search for https:// that's probably the easiest way to find it, because it will be, actually I'm not even sure it's HTTPS given it. That should be HTTPS. But okay. Then, yeah.
Well, I'll do my hunting to see where it leads me.
Yeah, and if you have any issues, let me know and I'll hunt it down. It's something I go and hunt down whenever I need it, which is actually not, well, yeah. So that's why I haven't done it yet.
And I think that's why having a blog post would be useful here.
Yes, exactly. Then I'll hunt down your blog post instead. I don't know if anyone wants to claim the create and tag. I'm reasonably sure I didn't do that. It is a fairly simple PR if someone wants to do that. The idea being that right now create and tag are two operations. So there is a window where you create an EBS volume, but it is not tagged, so it could, in theory, leak. AWS in March-ish announced an atomic operation to do an EBS create and tag, and we should just switch to it. Previously, we couldn't do it because the SDK was, we had an older SDK. We now have a newer SDK, so it's there. It just needs someone to do the 10-line change, I would guess. If anyone wants to claim it, it's a great starter issue. Otherwise, I will just send it in. Okay, I'll send it. Or let me know if you want to claim it. How about that? All right, let's see. So we have some other things on the agenda already, which is great. Well, and to finish up the 1.9 thing, there are some release notes. I feel like AWS has more features than most. So do have a quick look at the release notes. But yeah, I think NLB is great in alpha. I wouldn't recommend it in production yet. I think that's fair, right, Micah? And or like, yeah, but like try it out in your dev cluster. That we know we found an issue recently with 2 ports, so there were definitely issues, but it is going to be great. And as we do the dot releases, it should get better. Yeah, it's probably too early anyway to use 1.9.0. I would suggest, and that's really brave in production. So there we go. And yeah, if anyone wants to look at the release notes, do fire a comment. But I think they're starting to lock them down for final release. So, but we can always do a 1.9.1 note or try to get in afterwards. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next thing on the agenda.
Let me say a word about 1.9, if you don't mind, Justin. So 1.9 is upgrading CNI, the actual interface, which makes me, needless to say, very nervous. So big changes around networking. IPv6 is in alpha. So caution, warning, fingers crossed. Definitely don't run 1.8.0 in production. Let's wait till, or 1.9.0 in production, sorry. Let's wait till 1.9.3 or 1.9.2. So everybody gets the networking hiccups worked out. I guarantee you there's a bunch of CNI providers that are just gonna be on fire afterwards. So sorry for my diatribe, but just wanted to put that out there in the ether.
So now, is there only the networking changing, or are there were discussions around kubedns to OpenDNS as well? Is that happening in 1.9 timeframe as well?
You mean core?
Core DNS. Yeah, core DNS.
Yeah, Justin, do you know if they're in alpha? I think they're in alpha for 1.9.
That's what I heard.
What is an alpha? I'm sorry.
Core DNS. Well, somebody else chimed in. So
Oh.
Core DNS is an alpha for 1.9.
Okay.
They're dropping in support into COPS right now. But yeah, if we can start testing that on AWS, that'd be wonderful as well, because I know it hasn't been burned in AWS much.
Well, I mean, one thing we have done is, as part of the AWS workshop that we have built for Kubernetes, we have like a chapter which talks about how to use core DNS anyway. And that chapter has been tested by a few folks, I know, because it has had some updates and all. So that's one part we have verified, and that's what I was wondering. When does the kubedns to core DNS change happens?
Anybody have any questions about the CNI changes?
To confirm, we're going to CNI 060, correct? Okay.
CNI 1.5, or the previous version works as well, by the way, with 1.9, because that's all we've been testing against, Justin, in COPS. So we haven't even tested the new CNI provider for 1.9 on AWS.
That's going to get fixed. All right.
Well, merge my PR for file assets, and I'll fix it right after that. Anyways.
All right. And so next up on the agenda is limit increase for SIG testing. I presume this is either Arun or Chris.
Yeah, that's me. So we have been having this email conversation with the Google folks and SIG testing as well. I've seen email threads going back and forth. It would be nice to get to this level, but I'm not really getting a clear number that what is it that the limit should be increased to. Because once I get the number that, okay, 110, whatever that concrete number is, nice to is good, but is that the number that you want? Or you want a bigger than that number, so that I want to go back and ring the bell once and then say, okay, you know what, this is the number.
So this is about concurrent testing on our EDE infrastructure. And what happens on the Google side is they have something called sig-aws. I was trying to remember that name. And what sig-aws does is it essentially does a lock so that test jobs will get a project assigned to them. And so because of that, it means that there's like a limited number of projects that is multiplexed amongst the tests. And I think if sig-aws is overloaded, the tests will spin for a limited amount of time. So there's a natural limit in the tests as to how many concurrent projects and therefore resources the test will use. That does not happen on AWS currently. And so I think the answer is we don't have a limit technically right now, but I would say let's pick a sensible number and then let's implement sig-aws. So if the number is going to be, if 100 sounds great, and then I feel like the other issues, if we have 20 clusters running in one account, we're going to start hitting other rate limit issues. The natural AWS API rate limits, because we're not light. The ETE tests are not light on the Kubernetes API. They will try to create volumes and do things like that. So I would say if 100 is doable, let's do 100, and then we can implement sig-aws or whatever the equivalent would be, so that we limit the amount of concurrency that happens. Because 100 instances per region. So if we shard that out over, I don't know, 10, how many regions are there? 10 regions, then that is a lot of concurrent jobs running. The issue is right now it's random, and so we could end up in theory with them all running in the same zone in the same region.
Well, and it gets even messier once we go to HA, Justin, because we're increasing our masters from 1 to 3.
Yeah, I think if we have 100 and then we try to limit it to 10 tests per region, when we get there, then that will be, what's wrong with that? 10 concurrent tests per region.
We hit limits. 10 tests per region. We need to, well, I don't know. We need to play with it is the bottom line. I could guess all day long.
I think we had a very low limit in one of the regions, which is why this came up. I think the limit was 1 or 3 instances. It was silly low. I don't really know why that limit was there. I think the default is 10, so I don't know how we got a limit of 1.
So are we looking at limit of 100 per region essentially?
I think that would be
100 EC2 instances per region.
I think that would be more than we want. I think that, yes, so that would be great. I think, we could probably, we're not really going to want to run more than 10 tests in a region no matter what, because we'll hit other limits, which will make the tests flaky. And we have to deal with those things, but we have to deal with those issues, but we don't want the tests to be, we want to test them as a genuine test. We don't want it to be randomly causing PRs to flake.
So one of the discussions that we had in the earlier days, it was also, I would like the AWS tests to be run those scalability tests as well, 2,000 node, 5,000 node. So if we are giving a limit of only 100 nodes per region, how does that work?
I suggest what we do is we have one region or one account where we have a limit that will enable us to do whatever test you want. And I think we can have a limit on one instance type, right? So we could, let's figure out what instance type that is, and in that one region or one account, we will have a limit that is much higher.
Okay, fair deal. So I guess I'm still hearing that we have an approximate idea of what would we like it to be, but we don't have the concrete details. So I guess my point is I sent a mail to Sen this morning. I would like to know those exact details, so that once I have the details, I just want to send one email that I want 17 regions all bumped up to 100. Take this one region, bump it up to 5,000, up to this M4 large instance, whatever the type is. And once I send that email, then I can keep going back on that.
That to me sounds right. I don't think I think 100, when we hit the 100 limit, the next step for us is to change the test infrastructure to start, being smarter about it, less random.
Understood. Okay. So I guess then I would need to know the region in which we need to bump up to 5,000, and I need to know the instance size as well.
Yeah. And we need to target that one test to that region. And I want it to be a region that doesn't run regular tests, is what I'd recommend. Like run it in Sao Paulo or, wherever your engineers say, yeah, we're pretty high on capacity right now. And how often does that test run, Justin? There's 2 5K tests that run for GCE.
I don't know how often they run. We can run them whenever we want to. Right?
Well,
yeah. I mean, but that's like whatever. We don't have to be on the same schedule.
Yeah.
I think Arun, if there's an instance type or class in a region where it's better for, because it is an expensive test to run anywhere. So
Arun, this is complex enough. I would almost recommend setting up like a call for whoever wants to be involved with it, because like we have to babysit this sucker the first couple times it runs, and I don't want to. The worst thing we can do is slam a region hard on you guys, impact production with our stupid testing.
Yeah, no, I understand, and that's sort of my concern also at this point of time, because I don't think I have the clear requirements on what exactly the configuration we are looking for. Babysitting is one part of it, but before we even babysit, before I even go back to the AWS staff that, okay, guys, this is what I increased the limit to be, we need to kind of understand what the frequency is going to be, because I want to send a detailed email, because I presume bumping up a limit of an account to 5,000 instances would require a good justification. So to make sure that is no due diligence on my side, and then I send out, okay, this is why I need this to be done. Okay, what I'll do is maybe I'll ask, so Chris, you and Justin, you are on that thread as well. And by the way, what I want to do is I want to take this moment to introduce somebody on the call, Bryce Carmen. Bryce works for Amazon, and he is the EKS lead engineer here. He's the lead architect for EKS. So what I'll do is I'll include Bryce in the discussion as well, because he is intimately involved. He is intimately driving what needs to be tested for EKS. So I think what I'll do is I'll set up a call. Let's figure out that configuration, what it needs to be, and then I'll do the paperwork back in AWS on what that needs to look like.
Awesome, and welcome, Bryce. But whatever. I mean, we can also do whatever makes it easier for AWS in terms of that massive load. Like we can run spot instances, for example, if that helps, like not evict people, right? Whatever works best. But yeah, welcome, Bryce. Good to see you.
I wanted to say hi. I've been lurking for a little while, but now that we're officially announced, I feel like I can show my face now. So you'll probably be seeing more of me going forward. So nice to meet everyone.
Indeed. Well, great. So welcome. If there's nothing else on that, I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Kate's in Docker for Mac.
Oh, yeah. I think not related to AWS SIG per se, but I wanted to show this new, so Docker as well. As a Docker captain, I got limited access to how you can set up Kubernetes using Docker for Mac. So that was a brand new tool that was introduced literally yesterday, well, 2 days back actually. And I've been playing with this. A blog should be going out on that pretty soon. But essentially, now if I have a Docker for Mac, and maybe what I want to do is actually want to share my screen here and show what's possible here. So
can somebody hear me?
Now we can.
So can I introduce myself?
Oh.
Please do, go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Henry Hotlett. I'm a software architect, and I've been working with getting Spring Boot REST services running in Docker and Kubernetes on my Mac. I've got some Spring Boot open source project work that I've published on GitHub, and at this point, I think I've got through the growing pains of getting Docker running locally, and my Spring Boot service running in Kubernetes locally. I've also use DataStax's driver to connect to Cassandra, both locally or on Amazon Cloud. And I was disappointed with DataStax's image missing, so I've got a single node Cassandra running with Bitnami on AWS EC2. So I'm happy to share whatever work that I've done since I've done the compatibility testing. What I don't have visibility into is how successful is Kubernetes on AWS, but in I think what I've learned, the Kubernetes pods are not configurable, which I think, according to Google, was they were calling it templating. So the concept of configurable pods was not offered. So I added configurability to a REST service by adding REST APIs to configure the pods themselves, mainly to configure remote IP address for the AWS EC2 instance and login and password for the Cassandra node. Not my preferred method of configuring pods, but that was the only fallback option. So that's what I have at this point.
That all sounds great. I don't know if you want to maybe put an agenda item for like links to some of the stuff you've been working on, but I know that like a lot of people will be interested to follow those links and read more about.
Yeah, I can provide some links if there's a place to provide them.
Why don't you just put them in the, may I suggest starting by putting them in the, like a new section in the agenda? Do you have the agenda link?
I don't think I have the agenda link. I think I have a calendar invite is what happened.
I think Arun has pasted it in the chat. Let me see if I can repaste.
There's a minutes document is all I know.
That works. Just if you put a section in there, then that will be a great place for people to discover some of the stuff you've done, and I know I'll check it out. So
yeah, they can try at their own pace. If they're learning how to build a REST service, I've given example code. They can download it and play around.
Awesome, thank you. And sorry, Arun, you were talking about the Docker.
Yeah, I was talking about it. That's okay. And I think this is very interesting. I mean, we would love to hear more of these and hear what people's concerns are on running Kubernetes on AWS. So anything is valuable in that sense. All right. So I was jumping to the point where I was ready to share my screen. I'm gonna go here and share my screen here. And so here I am. Like, if I look at Docker here, essentially, I can go to now preferences. And in preferences, I see a brand new tab here which says Kubernetes. Now I've already enabled it, but essentially if I enable it, I can say show system containers as well. Now I have Docker is running and Kubernetes is running. So both of them are essentially running on my local machine. And this is not Minikube at all. This is not using Minikube. This is using Docker for Mac, the Docker desktop. So essentially now, if I go here and I say kubectl config get context, if I can type correctly, it shows me two contexts here. There is one context for Minikube, and there is one context Docker for desktop. And if I say kubectl get nodes, it shows me the nodes. If I say pod, it'll show me the pods. Now I can deploy my applications over here. And then if I say Docker version here, it says the orchestrator is Kubernetes. So one of the challenges that we have had in our workshop is even getting Minikube to install, because it requires VirtualBox and people have an older version of VirtualBox and then they're not able to install it. But they typically do have a Docker desktop installed on it. So once this does become a GA, the way I was thinking is the local development environment could use Docker desktop, and then we'll say, oh, by the way, you have multiple contexts set up over here. Switch your context from Docker for desktop to a kops-based cluster, and then you can do your dev prod kind of a pipeline.
That is cool stuff, and that will. Yeah, I definitely will try that out when it's more different.
Yeah, I'm pushing out a blog literally in a day or so, which talks about how do you run Kubernetes locally on your machine. One is using Minikube, the other one is using Docker for desktop. Those are the sort of two credible options. And then I think this is something good that people should be aware of. And start looking at it. The other value that it also provides is if you are bought into the Docker ecosystem and you're building your applications using, say, Docker Compose, then you can take a Docker Compose application, and because your orchestrator is now set to Kubernetes, you can deploy your Docker Compose applications directly to Docker, and it will use the Kubernetes scheduler essentially.
Hey, Arun. Sorry. Is this actually available to test at this point for other people, or are you a special person in that respect?
I'm not a special person, but it's a private beta at this point of time, essentially. And what private beta means is, as a Docker captain, we got early access to this. You can go to the beta.docker.com, sign up for it, and when they start opening it more and more, then you will have access to it as well.
Cool. Thank you very much for the information. I appreciate that demo.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, a blog will be going out on this soon as well, because I think this is pretty exciting.
Greg has an interesting question about what happens with host path in this world, whether it goes to the Xhive VM, I guess you pronounce that, or whether it's the actual host OS, whether it maps to the host OS.
I don't know, because all I've done is I've enabled Kubernetes. I was able to deploy a pod or so, and my next venture, I literally got this working yesterday, but my next venture would be to actually start deploying some real applications to it. Take a look at what type::load balancer does. How does service discovery work? Does all those functionalities really look cool? So that's what I'm going to be hitting on today and maybe early next week.
Yeah, just look at what cloud provider it's running, and that will answer your questions to all that. Most likely it's not running a cloud provider, so if you do a load balancer service, it'll just explode.
Yeah.
Service will just fail.
Yeah.
I don't know if Seth is here, but Seth pointed me to something which Cloudflare did, where they have an ingress controller which does a warp connection. So that might make ingress actually work on your laptop, which would be pretty cool. It's sort of like, I think someone described it as ngrok for ingress.
Well, one of the things I've been wondering is, for places like Minikube or Docker for desktop, for example, it might be worthwhile running a Nginx as an ingress controller or whatever ingress controller, so that even though you might say type::load balancer, the service at least should not explode. I should have some sort of a working experience. Like, of course, when I go to AWS, it'll be a ELB or NLB, whatever works in a more scalable way. But at least on a local dev experience, by default, it should fire up an Nginx or whatever ingress controller. I don't care really, but give me an ingress controller, get my app up and running so that I can at least get a similar behavior.
If they're not already, we should urge them to kind of join in on the cloud provider plugin structure and see if we can just get an actual cloud provider for Docker for Mac and Docker for Windows and so on and so forth. Do it the proper way so that it feels like it's a native experience, so that as devs are working with this, it feels like the same as what it will be when they're in AWS or in GCP.
Right. And that's my intent as well, because now the discussions for the cloud provider working group has started already, but maybe they have been going on. We just getting into it. We have a private Slack channel for Cube for captains, I think. And there I'm going to give this feedback that I would like Docker guys to join the working group for cloud provider and have an experience by which we can actually have a working service so the type::load balancer should not explode.
Yeah.
Wow. So Docker would actually get involved. Sorry. Reference to what Tim said like a year ago. It's so awesome how much Docker's involved now.
Well, it is cool and it's good to see. And so I guess if there's nothing else, should we move on to the next item, which looks like some NLB things to be aware of? It was phrased otherwise, but Micah, did you put this on or did someone else?
Yeah, I dropped this in. So yeah, there's right now 2 known issues with NLB. One where there's a PR out for it, and it's been Inwell who made the PR he said he tried it with a COPS cluster, and he had that fix working. But we did identify another issue with load balancer source ranges where it wasn't properly like whitelisting IPs or restricting IPs or IP ciders. So that's another one I'll probably jump on. But Arun, I'd love to get with you about spinning up like a COPS cluster. We can talk offline later, but about getting a COPS cluster off a build. Because I'd love to know, how that works.
Yeah, I'm available today. So if you want to ping me after the call, we can hack something together, test it out and see where it goes. And that eventually could lead to a joint blog between you and me as well.
That'd be fantastic. Yep, cool.
And by the way, just to kind of keep it transparent, Micah has already written a blog talking about the NLB functionality that is coming up in 1.9. And he has sent me a draft. I'm working with our technical editor on that to get it published as part of AWS open source blog.
Very cool. Great to see. Yeah, and thank you, Micah, for that. It is a great contribution. So, and like your first contribution, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This has been a lot of fun.
And yeah, so do try it out. And I think we also want to get some EDE tests on that. So if anyone wants to do that, otherwise I can also help with that. Anyway.
Yeah, I'd love to get my head around EDE tests. So if you have anything you can point me toward, I'd love to get on that too.
Okay, sure. It is mostly just Go code, and then like the Go code itself is relatively straightforward. The infrastructure by which the tests run are not as straightforward. But
you're kind, Justin. I'm
really interested in that. I'm really interested in that as well. Actually, it might be interesting to have like a quick, sort of how-to session if somebody would be willing to host that. Because I was looking at some stuff with Chris Love about etcd, and I just didn't even know how to get started. So I'd be really interested. I bet Michael would be too. So maybe we
should piggyback that, Arun, with what's going on with the etcd HA testing. We could just get a group of people that are going to be involved with working on that and just kind of educate everybody at the same time.
I'm happy to share my experiences. I'm not sure I am,
Well, we'll just get one of the guys from SigTest as well.
Yes, they can like, I can give like the practical, this is what you probably need to know, and then maybe SigTest can tell me like everything that I was wrong about, but like I got away with for reasons that are, because it just works. But yeah, there's a bunch of things to sort of understand, but I have a superficial understanding and I can make it work. So that's probably good enough. So I'm happy to do that. I don't know when we would do it. I guess after Christmas, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do need is a better education on how to spin up your etcd cluster, whether it be co-located, whether it be, well, maybe too broad a topic, but should the etcd node be sitting with your master or separately? Like I know in EKS, we take the approach of keeping it separate from the master, but sort of having some discussion around that on why, what the topology of the cluster should look like. Like Chris was talking about, if your master is distributed across 3 regions, 3 zones actually, then we should have 9 etcd nodes. So I think number of those.
We don't know the answer to that.
Qualify.
But yeah, we need data before we even start that conversation.
Right.
Is what I'd have to say. Because otherwise we're just spinning our heels.
And I think though that I believe that there's some movement to like actually take on etcd management more seriously. I know that SIG cluster lifecycle is the likely place where it will land. I think Jace Dumars has also been like pinging me because I think there's another renegade group like that's meeting somewhere in secret. So reach out to him. He's sort of organizing that. I don't know what their plans are. I think previously it was sort of unclear who really was responsible for how to operate it, and that's going to change, I think, hopefully. I saw that they're going to announce, they are now deprecating etcd2 in 1.9, so the clock will start ticking, and that will mean that everyone will have to sort of take this more seriously. In terms of the configurations, although a lot of people run a separate etcd cluster, I think the only configuration that's actually tested in E2E right now is with etcd on localhost. So the sort of tight coupling of API server and etcd. And so you will see different behaviors in terms of latency, for example, if you split them out, but you have nicer, full behavior. Like if your etcd is on an isolated cluster, then if your API server consumes all your memory, you're not going to lose etcd no matter what.
Yeah, and for us, right now we're playing with EKS. We're playing around with etcd being on separate hosts, mostly just for operational ease, so that they can fail independently, that kind of stuff. But if there's guidance on how those should really be run, I think the whole community would benefit.
Yeah, there is, as far as I know, there's no guidance. It would be great to see E testing of it on a separate host. I don't see any real separate machine. I don't see any real issues other than like what is the latency impact of the network.
So every time I've asked for data, and that's usually what I base my guidance on, I really haven't gotten solid actionable data. So I think through the testing that we do, and Bryce, I know you guys are doing internal testing. If we can take the ETE-HA testing that we're doing and the testing that you guys are doing and combine them, I think we can come up with a couple recommendations and more like scenarios. Okay, this is when you'd run it off localhost, and this is when you would host your own.
What sort of data are you interested in?
Latency, performance, impact to the different controllers. What happens when you go from 3 to 9? What happens, basically, so we've got single-headed, HA, super HA, right? So, and what Arun referenced was we still have some open questions about how the exact implementation of the HA naming, or the name way they get quorum escapes me right now. But we have some questions about if 3 in 3AZs is able to maintain 5 nines, or if you drop a network partition, do you actually lose some capability? That way, having it in 3AZs, you would need to have 9 then. So, which is pretty much overkill, but if you're looking at 5 nines, it's always overkill anyways.
Yes. I don't know. Yeah. I hope we can find a venue to discuss. This is a much broader discussion than we probably want to have it's obviously very relevant to everyone in this channel, but it also is relevant to, everyone that is operating a Kubernetes cluster. So SIG cluster lifecycle and/or SIG cluster ops. And I don't want to, I don't know. It's a huge topic, and I don't know how to, I don't think we should focus it necessarily in sig-aws, but we do have to figure it out. And we've certainly talked a lot about it in the COPS side because it's like particularly relevant to COPS, but at the same time, like we have a lot of learnings in COPS that could be more broadly done. And I feel like there are probably other silos out there and people using their own setups that have a lot of learnings. And I would like to get that into a channel that's sort of like neutral, right? Because like GKE, I'm sure has a lot of experience of this, and we don't want to, they're not even going to be in this SIG. So it'll be good to figure it out. But I think, I don't know. I guess I'll find out whether SIG cluster lives. I'll put it on the agenda and try to update the agenda with what I find out. But I guess to find out whether it's official that SIG cluster lifecycle now owns etcd and whether we're going to have a working group or what the plan is. Did that cover the ETE-HA testing discussion that is the next thing on the agenda, or I don't know who put that on there.
I just put that there to mark that we talked about it.
Thank you. So next up is the AWS CNI provider in COPS. I don't know who.
Yeah, I added that, and Chris and I had some discussion about that a couple of weeks, last week actually, and I wanted to find out, the timeline for having the AWS CNI provider be integrated in COPS. Is that still 1.9 or COPS 1.9?
Yeah, I think there's a PR that I think basically looks good. I think there was some open discussion about whether there are remaining issues, but my idea is that we should probably merge it and let people find those issues, merge it with a suitable caveat, and let people experiment and find those issues and be able to use the plugin in a, integrated way.
Yeah. But I think
I tossed it back to your staff, Arun. I'm getting the name right now.
Livin.
Yeah, I tossed it back to her if we want to put a feature flag around it. or if we would just want to release as is with release notes saying, hey, this is alpha. So
yeah, well, this is an alpha feature essentially, and it is documented on the wiki as is. So it's just like NLB supports. Don't use it in production essentially. Bryce, what would you say?
Yeah, it's definitely alpha at this point. I mean, we've done internal testing, but still needs more usage in the community before it's really widely used.
right, we all get that it's alpha. The question that's on the PR is, do we have it hidden behind a COPS feature flag, which forces the user to set an environment variable to even be able to use it? Or do we just release it as is and say, hey, be warned, it ain't production, it's great, it's awesome, but please don't run in production yet.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a call for COPS. I don't know what the normal kind of procedure is for releasing new features. So, I would be happy getting it, more widely used. So it's kind of a policy of COPS in general, releasing new features. So
I think so too, because I think this is probably not the first time we are releasing a new alpha feature. So I guess we have to figure out, what has been the precedence in COPS essentially, and how these kind of features have been released in the past.
The precedent is we are not as good on network providers in terms of gating them as we are in other places. I would say if we're going strictly by precedent, we would just enable it and say you're not going to accidentally enable the provider, without typing, network, whatever that magic word is. And I think it's currently AWS-ENI-CNI something. So it's not going to happen by mistake. So I think that's been fine to date. Whether we want to be stricter about that in COPS, we can do that, but I don't think we need to gate this particular PR on that. We know it's alpha, we can document it as such. And I did put the link in there. It's a cool thing to experiment with. I know, Greg, you don't use COPS yet, but the PR is there, and I'm sure it links to the actual plugin for anyone that wants to try it on their own non-COPS setup.
I think one of the fantasy blogs would be to use this particular build of COPS with Kubernetes 1.9 and use NLB and CNI together.
Kubernetes the bleeding edge way, yeah. Warning, do not use it in production. Yes, that would be awesome. Yeah, exactly. Like, if you want to try the latest, let's remember the Gen 2 of COPS, as it were, or Kubernetes. That'd be cool. All right. And then we have some links, or a link to the Spring Boot stuff, which Quantum Fusion, whose real name, what is, I missed your real name, I'm sorry.
This is Henry Hotlett.
Hey.
I am Quantum Fusion.
You are Quantum Fusion.
Yeah.
So, Quantum Fusion has, yeah.
I've all right. So I can introduce myself. So my background, I've been building microservices. I was a platform architect at Verizon. So much of what I've done has been battle tested on Amazon in a straight EC2 environment with Spring Boot, and so that was the problem in 2015. This is 2017, and the landscape has changed a little bit. So I think Docker and Kubernetes have emerged, and so my goal was to do a few things. One is to provide a sample test case that people can look at and understand, which I've provided. Nothing product oriented, but I've provided a Swagger Spring Boot app as an example. It leverages the pivotal Spring Boot investment, and of course you can add or delete things from it, but you can use it as a design guide. It also supports Docker running on Mac locally. It supports Kubernetes running locally, and it's configurable. So you can point to a database backend, whether it's on Amazon or running local. It basically runs Cassandra, and it integrates with DataStax's AWS as well. But basically, you just point to the Cassandra backend, and the service layer, REST layer is a separate concern from the database itself.
Very cool stuff. Thank you. And yeah, it seems like that is going to be like an increasingly big topic. I know like Brendan Burns did a keynote about, putting annotations in the code, which sort of feels like, the next level is how do we actually run applications on Kubernetes in the real world. And so this is great to see.
Exactly. So this could be used as a test case. I've also vetted much of my work with the Pivotal guys that write the Spring Boot stuff. So I made some substantial improvements on that. There's also some crypto layers, which I've not fully integrated into a REST service, but I've been working on end-to-end encryption as well, which is a separate project not related to this discussion. So that's kind of what I've offered here is a general purpose use case that could be used with Docker, Kubernetes. Of course, you could have your own test cases, but this is useful if somebody's trying to learn how to get into this field.
Cool. Well, thank you. And I think that was the last thing on our agenda. I don't know if anyone has any other drop-ins they want to fire in. Otherwise, everyone gets 9 minutes back, and happy holidays as you choose to celebrate them.
Happy holidays.
Are we meeting in 2 weeks?
I said yes. So I think,
Oh, that'll be December 30th.
December 29th, right? What do people think? Do we want to meet in 2 weeks?
I will have to really dial in from Cancun.
Why don't we'll have a meeting, but we won't decide anything too important. Like we won't have any binding votes unless I decide to. But we will have a meeting for anyone that wants to show up, but I can't imagine that we'll be here, and if they are here, I hope everyone is wearing a silly hat. Cool.
All right, bye guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you, Justin.